Hello, and thanks for joining us today. We've got a super interesting session lined up, which has been designed to help remove the guesswork when it comes to creativity and put data and insight at the heart of your video strategy. So first things first, drop a note in the chat to say hello and let us know where you're joining from today. And before I hand over to JB to get into the fun bit, just some quick things to remember. So we're recording this session and you'll receive an email link after the webinar so you can watch on demand. If you see anything that you find particularly interesting, please do take a screenshot, share your key takeouts on LinkedIn and tag us at Wooshii. If you have any questions, you'll find please ask a question function at the top right of the screen, just above the chat. So pop any questions in there as we go and we'll cover as many as we can at the end of the session. So if you're ready, over to you, JB.
Thank you, Laura. So yes, I'm Jonathan. I work as the commercial director for technology here at Wooshii. And as Laura said, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about unleashing the power of a data-driven strategy when it comes to your video content. We're talking about removing the guesswork and hopefully being wrong less often when it comes to our video plans. Now, we all understand the theory behind deploying a data-driven content strategy. But the reality is it's hard. Like, this is hard stuff to do. It's hard because it often involves combining multiple data sets together and getting our heads around the causality between that kind of quantitative and qualitative information that we need to juggle in order to truly get ourselves into a position where we can say we've got a proper data-driven creative video strategy. So it's difficult to do. We know what the theory is behind it, but we have now got at our fingertips a new tool that we can use to help us get data-driven in a way that really hasn't been possible in the past. And we couldn't possibly have a webinar without talking about AI, artificial intelligence. The whole world is talking about AI right now. So in this session, we're going to dive into how we as communicators, as content creators, as marketing people and people who are responsible for creating video that performs, how we can kind of take advantage of this new technology and get ourselves kind of match fit for a data-driven video strategy. And this is really all about removing the guesswork. You know, video is expensive, it's time consuming, it requires a lot of resource to just do video. So we want to make sure that we are completely optimized with everything we do. We're probably all feeling this as people who around content. You know, every dollar, every pound, every euro counts at the moment. It all matters. ROI is massively under the microscope, especially when it comes to the heavy investments that is required to get video out there. And the margins for error are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So as the architects of creative video content, we want to stay creative. We want to make cool stuff, but we want to make sure that we're pointing our limited resources in the right direction, that we're optimized and we're hitting our targets more often than not. So this is really about kind of eliminating guesswork as much as we possibly can with our video strategy. So as I said, we're going to be looking at AI and machine learning, and we're going to be looking at some of the kind of functionality of this new technology in terms of how we can leverage it as content creators. We'll look at a couple of other models just to kind of get a bit of a background in terms of how these technologies are powering other industries out there. But we're really going to focus in on how, as content creators, we can leverage some of this amazing power as well. But it's important to understand exactly what we're talking about here when we talk about AI and machine learning, because we're basically trying to describe models that have been trained on massive data sets, hugely complex data sets, with the view to getting us down to patterns and trends and insights that we might not have been able to spot with our own human eyes. And this is really inherently what AI is very, very good at. It's about taking that kind of set of data and presenting us with micro insights that we can then go off and action in a meaningful way. The other thing about AI systems, and the thing that really makes them different to a kind of a hard-coded program, is that they are designed ultimately to mimic us. To mimic human intelligence. They are also given the freedom to learn and iterate based on successes or failures. They can adapt, they can make decisions based on data input. So they're not hard-coded, they're not strictly rule-based in the way that classical software is. Sometimes we can get unexpected or just downright wrong results off the back of using AI for things. It's not 100% foolproof, but for the most part, it is shockingly good, and it is getting better and better all the time. So a couple of fascinating models that currently use AI at the moment to just improve our lives and improve business. One that I recently discovered that I just find absolutely fascinating is Amazon's anticipatory shipping. So essentially, they're using kind of recommendation engines and things to be able to predict what we're going to buy, to the point now where what they're able to do is actually start to physically ship items closer to your address based on the likelihood of you actually going ahead and buying that product. This is one of the reasons why Amazon is so good at getting things to our doorstep so quickly, because actually they're able to forecast a lot of the logistics that happen behind the scenes based on the likelihood of us buying. So we've got AI way in the background that is actually moving products closer to your doorstep before you've even clicked buy. It's just fascinating how ultimately predictable we are, to the point where you can even start preempting your logistics off the back of some of those algorithms. It's YouTube, so we all know and experience the power of YouTube's recommendation engine. But did you know that it now counts for about 70% of the time that we spend on YouTube? The fact that it is so good at being able to recommend content to us is driving a huge amount of the time that we spend on the platform. And interestingly, you know, the algorithm is actually even better at knowing what we want to watch than we are, apparently, because we see this in terms of how YouTube serves content. Back in the day, it used to be a case of you hit subscribe on a channel and then you just get served everything that that channel has to offer. But that isn't the case anymore. You know, despite the fact that we tell YouTube this is a channel we want to watch, you don't necessarily get exposed to all of that content from that particular creator, much to the disdain and confusion of a lot of content creators out there. You know, the distribution model on YouTube is much more algorithmically driven than it is that kind of blunt instrument of just I've subscribed to something, so that's only what I want to see. It's much broader than that. It's much more complex. And as I said, about 20% of time spent on YouTube is now being driven by AI recommendation models. And then, of course, we get onto the star of the show right now, the technology that everybody's talking about and everybody's minds have been well and truly blown when it comes to the power of ChatGPT. And the reason that this is so good at doing our jobs for us, helping us to be more productive and in life in general, is because it is so good at replicating the way that we communicate with each other. Its main task, of course, is to construct sentences by contextually predicting what word is going to come next. So you could take a sentence like this, seemingly a very, very simple sentence for us lot as humans to understand. I have a pet named Rover. It is a blank. So the challenge for the AI behind GTP is to fill in the missing word. Now, for us, pretty straightforward. A program, it has to understand a lot about what we're saying here. It has to understand what a pet is. What is a pet likely to be? So that kind of gets us down to just a handful of animals from potential. It has to understand that we name our pets. And then it has to scan potentially trillions of pieces of text to understand that for some reason we like to call our dogs Rover. So, you know, in that particular case, the strong likelihood is that the missing word is dog. But to get to that point, as I said, it has been trained on billions, if not trillions of pieces of text-based information to be able to apply the most probable word and to use it in a sentence. So it doesn't properly understand what it's saying like a human does. It is just literally stacking one word after another based on the mathematical probability of that word being used next. So you could say it's a kind of an understanding of sorts, or that it is extremely good at replicating the patterns that form our written language. And this is like a really important thing to keep in your mind throughout this. It's all about patterns. It's all about predictability, and the, I suppose, slightly disappointing reality that humans are just incredibly predictable. You know, in the case of GTP, its raw data set is our alphabet. Its training is pretty much everything we've ever written down as a species. And all its job is to do is to replicate those patterns in terms of how we communicate with each other. And it is surprising and somewhat shocking just how human it's able to come across. A lot of people, you know, actually believe that there is someone in the box but there isn't. I don't think there is, but it is incredible just how accurate it is, that not only across the kind of the technical way that we communicate and use our language, but the emotional way that we do so. And for content creators, people that create video, people that are communicating, this is something that we can certainly leverage. And just another fun example here this morning, I got GTP to write the lyrics of a 3-minute love song. You'll be delighted to hear. But what we're seeing here is its use of what's called natural language processing. And this is part of the reason why it is just uncannily good at being able to gauge emotional sentiments and be able to, as I said, kind of come across as being very human, even though all it is technically doing is kind of stitching words together. So, you know, the AI that we have at our fingertips is not only good at constructing sentences and constructing patterns, but it is very good at coming across and mimicking the emotional way and the expressions and the behaviors that we use that make us human. And I think for a lot of us who've ever used a tool like this is the bit that really kind of blows us away, and the kind of the game-changing element of this. It feels very much like you're talking to a, let's say, somewhat unrealistically polite human being, although we're not. So the reality is that it's able to do this because us humans are just inherently very predictable. You could say we live a very kind of pattern-based life. Just like how a retailer can predict with a huge degree of accuracy what we want to buy, and platforms like YouTube and Netflix can predict very accurately what we want to watch, models like GTP can predict the patterns that make up our daily conversations. So it is important to remember, while it doesn't really understand us, it is just very, very good at mimicking us and second guessing us, which is why it's almost impossible to beat at chess. But for content creators, this is where things start to get really, really interesting, and where we can start leveraging this power and putting it to use in our creative strategies moving forwards. So with a basic understanding of how it all works, we start to open up this whole new world of possibilities when it comes to leveraging the power of AI in a data-driven workflow. We understand the theory behind being data-driven with our video plans, but in reality, we all know that it is much easier said until now. So one of the features that we recently deployed in our own analytics platform called Wooshii Insight, AI-powered creative assessment of any given customer's entire content library. So at scale, we can run AI over every video that you've ever created and ask it to essentially understand what it's hearing and what it's seeing. And it's doing this by onboarding all of the transcripts from any given video and trying to understand the kind of a sentiment in that dialogue. And it's able to then look at scene recognition, what it's actually portrayed in terms of story from an image standpoint. Once that's done, once we've scanned every single video, what we can then do is start to overlay some of that quantitative data that you typically use to assess the performance of your videos with this new layer of AI-driven qualitative data derived from the AI's understanding of what's actually inside your content and what your content's really about. So just to kind of frame this a little bit and put this into context, if you look at this is a screenshot from the back end of my YouTube studio. It gives us a typical kind of view of some of the kind of quantitative data that you typically find inside an analytics dashboard like this, if you're lucky enough to have access to some. You can start to kind of create these overlays. You could look at, for example, here we've got my watch time versus my impressions. We can see a little bit of a trend here, a bit of a downward trend, actually, unfortunately. We can see a few kind of spikes here that might indicate some kind of seasonality. But it is very difficult for me as a human being to start to kind of correlate some of the cause and effect that I might want to take back into my content strategy. This is very quantitative. This is very numerical. It's very kind of matter of fact in terms of this particular data set looking at doesn't necessarily give me a lot of insights I can action in terms of my actual content direction moving forwards. So what we're starting to get with this layer of insights is a whole new way of looking at our data that takes us way beyond just the quantitative with a very kind of powerful overlay of the qualitative as well. But to actually do that, what we need to do is analyze not just the raw data in terms of your performance data, but as I said, we also need to be able to analyze every frame of video that you've ever created in order to get a view in terms of what's happening and how your kind of creative factors inside your content are driving your performance. So before the AI arrived, of course, you can imagine this is for human beings to do. It's one of the hardest things about a proper data-driven video strategy. It's bridging that gap between what the numbers tell you and how you interpret that into your kind of creative plans moving forward. This has always been the kind of the thing that's broken that data-driven model. It's just the sheer complexity of doing that. And you could say, well, doing it on a smaller scale is pretty straightforward. I mean, maybe I could look at a video and go, that was just inherently a bad video, and the performance reflects that. But we're talking about trying to do this at massive scale. So if you're looking after a big brand, or if you're creating, potentially hundreds of thousands of videos for an organization, how do you start to do that at scale to the point you can wrong less often, make kind of better calls on your creative strategy based on your data? But it turns out that artificial intelligence actually finds this quite easy and straightforward to do, unlike us humans. So what we're looking at here is just a quick snapshot, and we'll jump into some of this in a little bit more detail shortly as well. So sorry if it's a little bit hard to see scrolling up and down on the page. What we're looking at here is the creative fact inside our analytics platform, Wooshii Insight. And what we're doing here is we're running AI to gain a deep qualitative assessment of all of your content. And this is trained specifically on your content, which is then overlaid on top of that kind of qualitative performance data. In this case, we're looking at views and likes, but it could be anything in that data set. And as I said, this has only been made possible by AI's inherent ability to understand those various creative factors at scale and find the patterns that might just be impacting our performance. Be anything from things like story structure, it could be language complexity, it could be use of humor, it could be the number of times you've mentioned a product. For customers that we onboard, we take on board their video transcripts, we run scene recognition, and we're kind of all these creative factors, say for example, like humor, where we might be looking for the use of things like puns or wordplay or unexpected twists, absurdity, or social norms being turned on their head, all that kind of stuff that, as far as the AI is concerned, was an attempt at humor. Although I don't know if it necessarily knows whether the joke landed or not yet, but it's looking for those kind of patterns that indicate some of these creative factors. So once understood, that's when we start to open up this whole new world of fascinating insight that may have been previously hidden by just looking at more of that kind of quantitative data set. So we'll jump in here and take a couple of kind of moves into some of the specifics we can see inside of Wooshii Insights when we start running this augmentation of AI and performance data. So here's just one snapshot that we took from a sample set of data where we look at a correlation between your views and your likes versus the number of times you do things like use jargon words, for example. So we can see here, looking at this chart in this particular sample data, and not going to be the same for everyone, but just in this case as an example, we can see that clear downward correlation in views and engagement based on the number of times that you use jargon in your video content. So you can take a snapshot view at a chart like this and really bring something meaningful back to your creative planning. You can see quite clearly that there is a correlation between a drop in engagement and the number of times you use a jargon word. But actually, interestingly, in this particular case, there is a bit of a jargon sweet spot, you could say, where 4 to 8 jargon words have been used a minute. We seem to have this kind of, this not massive, but kind of, fairly off peak, which then declines down. But actually, there is an opportunity, it looks like there's an opportunity amongst this particular audience to deliver a degree of specialization or a degree of complexity, because this is probably quite needed, expects some level of detail. So a little bit of jargon's okay, but we can see that there is a clear drop off. As I said, this is the first time that we can actually kind of prove some of the stuff that we may have suspected amongst that impact between what we're doing creatively and how it's affecting performance. But this trend won't be the same for everyone. It's different on a customer by customer basis. Another couple of snapshots here at just a few charts that we pulled in. So here we can see on the left hand side message clarity score. So this is looking at how clear is your message, how clear is the kind of the core thing that you're trying to articulate coming across video through your use of dialogue, through your use of on-screen text, and through your use of footage. And we can see here a kind of a clear upward trend in terms of views and likes based on how clear you are in your messaging. So again, you can take that back to the scripting stage and really focus in this particular case on in your messaging, and you don't confuse your audience. And then we get into other assessment here, like subject matter complexity. What we've done in this particular case is sliced up based on required education level to understand this particular video. So whether you're kind of an undergraduate, college, elementary, or high school. This particular chart shows a bit of a win for slightly more complex language. So I'm guessing that this has come from a fairly specialized channel where there is a slightly more grown-up audience who expects a high information page. If these two charts were from the same channel, I'm not sure they were, you could say something like, well, it's clear that you need to be clear in terms of how you're articulating your message, but you can get away with complex language. You can be detailed in that, but still, in order to fully optimize, you still need that level of clarity. So what we're trying to show here is that it's very easy once you start to get this kind of view into your content performance to fold that back right into your kind of scripting and your creative process in terms of how you're going to design your content moving forwards. Here's a bit of a classic one. This is looking at product mention frequency, so something that we may have expected for a while. The number of times that you mention a product versus your engagement, your views and your likes. And again, we can see some kind of clear decline here in this particular sample set of data, where the obvious action would be, well, if you want to get maximum reach and if you want to get maximum engagement, we need to slightly pare back the number of times we push the products on people, because clearly there's some kind of cause and effect going on here with product mentions versus our kind of engagement. Now, sometimes with these charts, we need a little bit more kind of clarity in terms of exactly what we're looking at. So that's why inside Wooshii Insight, we also built another layer of AI, which is all about helping our customers to better understand what the data is actually saying to them. So we built a chatbot of our own called Wooshii Quantum, which enables you to basically have a conversation with your data, which is really fascinating. So we can go in and we can ask it some kind of slightly more quantitative questions like, what is this particular chart showing me? So in this case, we're looking at the subject matter complexity, and it's just giving me a bit of an overview in terms of how it's pulled data together, so that we're crystal clear in terms of what it's looking at. But what we actually do is start using AI to have a bit more of an emotional or human conversation with our data in terms of asking it about how I should pull solutions from this. What recommendations would you make based on what you've just seen in this set of data? So we go from very hard numbers and figures to content recommendations being driven by AI's inherent ability to understand what makes us tick as people. And this is really important. This is a really important thing to remember when it comes to this technology. It kind of has a grasp of the things that we're most likely to do. So we can really start to leverage this in terms of how it kind of helps us when it comes to our content strategy. So at the moment inside of Wooshii Insight, we've got about 30 different creative factors that we're looking at to help our customers to better assess the little subtle nuances inside their content. But we're going to keep expanding that as the technology gets more powerful. We can bring in more creative factors. And again, it's not just about augmenting view, like you can augment any element of your performance data, any element of that kind of quantitative data into mix in order to get a particular insight out of the back end. So with this kind of technology, we're not saying that it's about letting AI do everything. We're saying that there is this kind of sweet spot between, us lot as humans, us lot as people that create communications and want to remain creative, and just making sure that we're pointing our limited, stressed resources in the best possible direction, giving our videos a fighting chance to find successful. And with this new tool on our side, knowing everything we know about how this stuff works and being able to leverage it and fold it in a creative workflow, we have a really exciting future ahead of us when it comes to this new level of insights that we can start to pull out of our performance, and that new way that we can start to make creative decisions based not just on that kind of quantitative data, but with, for the first time, really being able to look at qualitative insights at scale and bring that into the mix as well. So that was 25 minutes talking about AI, and it went by in a heartbeat. So thank you very much for watching. We've just about got time for a couple of questions. My contact details are up here on the screen if you want to get in touch.
Thank you, JB. That was fantastic. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to hear your 3-minute love song, but maybe that's one to save for the Christmas party.
Yeah, I think so.
So fantastic. Thanks, JB. Just to kind of lead on from that, beyond what JB's shown us today, there are many other features to the Wooshii Insight platform and new integrations and functionality coming constantly. So if you'd like to deep dive into your own data or learn a bit more about the platform, then please do reach out to JB directly and we can schedule in a demo for you. So now is the time to ask any questions if you have any. We do have a couple, so I'll just lead straight into them, JB, if that works for you. Question number 1, how do you quantify the success of a video using your system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we encourage anybody using analytics to do is you got to define what good looks like from the outset, really. And we do, we can kind of help people to do that, but generally speaking, we kind of split it into 3 different pots. You've got your kind of business metric. You might be looking at things like ROI. What are we getting back in terms of my returns on a video? And within Wooshii Insight, we can help people to do that by applying a monetary value to certain actions, depending on what it is and how you're kind of weighting certain engagements. So, a conversion may be worth X amount, a like might be worth Y amount, or a review might have a value as well. So you can literally just kind of go in and program that and then create a dashboard that shows you a view on very hard, matter of fact, ROI. You might be working in a social audience engagement team, and actually your metrics are slightly different. So you might be tracking, things like sentiment, or you might be tracking, your kind of general engagements. Did people share it? What kind of comments did we get? Was there any CRM that we can learn off the back of this? Or you might be working in more kind of performance marketing, where really you're all about, did this video fill my funnel? Did I get a conversion out of this video? And we can build a dashboard that tracks those core metrics and those core KPIs depending on what you care about most. So really, I think the to answer that question, it's understand what good France, and then make sure you build a dashboard that can track those core KPIs depending on what you care about most for that particular campaign or that particular video.
Perfect. Very good answer. We've also had a couple of people asking about the specifics in the platform around what integrations the platform has. So what channels does the Wooshii Insight platform integrate with currently?
Yeah, so basically all the usual suspects. So you can plug it into the back end of YouTube, plug into all the platforms like Facebook and Instagram, also LinkedIn as well. And then essentially anything that has an API. So that could be your own platform, if you're using Brightcove on your own website or whatever you're using. Anything that has an API that we can connect to, we can pull it in. And once you've done that, you've got a very kind of defragmented view of all of those different analytics all in one place. So it's about bringing everything together and hopefully opening up that insight to more people who wouldn't normally have access to all of the back end of those different systems.
Perfect. And okay, we've got a couple minutes left, so I'll just go for the one big question to round us off. What do you think the future is for qualitative data and video success?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, this is going to sound really cheesy, but I think the future is kind of now a little bit, because for the first time, what we can do is qualitative assessment at scale. This has always been the thing that's been really, really difficult to do. You do a qualitative assessment at small scale. That's not the challenge. The hard thing is doing it across your entire content library, across all of your archive and everything you've ever created and everything that you will create moving forwards. That's where AI kind of comes into this, because it basically can now treat a piece of content like a data set. By fundamentally understanding it and being able to do that incredibly quickly, we get to the point where your entire library can be understood and assessed and then overlaid with quantitative data in a split second. So that, I think, is about as far into the future as I can see with this at the moment. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating. The more brands do this, the more people start to do this, and the trends and the insights that we're going to start manifesting off the back of this new way of assessing our performance.
Wowzers. Well done. That was quite a pie in the sky question, and you gave a non-fluffy answer. Perfect. That brings us right on to 4:30. So all on time. If anyone has any questions that haven't been answered, or if you want to find out more information, as I said before, we'll share a copy of the recording, link to the recording, and JB's contact details, so you can get in touch with him directly. And all that's left to say is thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.